All right, good morning. Whether it's accidental or not, we find ourselves once again in the basement talking about Black Power. Not in the wide, expansive, really bucolic setting that we were all in. People might say, well, are you being really sensitive? I'm not a Southerner. I'm from New York City, Southside Jamaica, Queens, and I'm also the son of Haitian immigrants. So that's a dash of the radicalism of the West Indies that produced people like Stokely Carmichael. So I take my racial politics very sensitively. So I think the fact that we're in the basement here, hopefully when we do conferences like this in the future, we can be in the bucolic civil rights setting as well. Before I start, a few things. One, I want to thank Jacqueline Dowd Hall for the invitation. For those of us who do work on Black Power, it's been a long haul. It's been a long haul. This whole notion and this whole subfield of Black Power studies has been percolating over the last really 15 years. Certainly there's been an evolution in Black Power scholarship that predates that, but the specific attempt to theorize and to really historiographically engage Black Power at a sophisticated level is something relatively recent. That being said, there's a special issue of the magazine of History that I recently guest edited that me and Dr. Williams will be giving out at the end of this presentation. And it provides a context for scholars of all stripes to really try to engage with the Black Power movement and Black Power historiography as one of the most important subfields and developments in the historiography of post-war America. That being said, my paper today is really part of a much larger project. It's really part of a 76-page manuscript with 175 endnotes that looks at the evolution of Black Power scholarship. That's going to be published somewhere soon. That being said, I'm going to mention a lot of books today, but one thing I should say at the outset, this whole notion of Black Power studies certainly converges and interacts with this notion of the long civil rights movement, but it also stands separate and distinct. So one of the things I talked about in 2006 in my anthology, The Black Power Movement, was also a long Black Power movement, something that I owe to both Jacqueline Dowd Hall and Nikhil Singh's notion of a long civil rights era. Nikhil Singh talked about a long civil rights era in 2004, and Jacqueline Dowd Hall talked about a long civil rights movement in 2005, and certainly that's why one of the reasons that we're here today. So I'm going to talk about certain books today, but this doesn't mean that this is exhaustive. It means that these are just the specific books and specific scholars I'm talking about. That being said, there's many scholars whose work I don't talk about in this talk, but who I do cite and I reference in the longer paper, including people who are here today, people like Hassan Jeffries and other scholars who are doing yeoman work on this era. So let me begin. Conventional civil rights narratives, until recently, accepted as wisdom that Black Power undermined struggles for racial justice, differing more in degrees of condemnation than analysis of the movement's self-destructive impact. The embrace of at times violent rhetoric, misogyny, and bravado by Black Power advocates have made them and their struggles easy targets for both demonization and dismissal. For instance, Black Power stands at the center of declension narratives of the broader 1960s, its destructive reach poisoning the new left's innocence, corrupting a generation of Black activists, and steering civil rights off course in a manner that reinforced racial segregation by allowing politicians an easily defined and frightening scapegoat. The backlash that followed seemingly upended the civil rights movement's potential to establish new democratic frontiers. This particular narrative still too often provides the basis for popular understanding as well as scholarly framing of Black Power. However, Black Power is far more reaching and complicated than this. Even new civil rights historiography has forcefully challenged this older interpretation, arguing that Black Power and civil rights engage in a complex, if fitful and fraught, dialogue with one another. Recent scholarship on the evolution of black radicalism in the 20th century also has provided further historical context for black power's emergence. National and local studies of black power have done the most to expose the limits of conventional interpretations of the era. I define black power as a social, political, and cultural movement that advocated political self-determination, racial solidarity, and a reimagined racial identity as part of a larger quest to fundamentally transform America's democratic institutions. The movement's ethos was deeply rooted in, while simultaneously transcending, the complicated matrix of black nationalist struggles. On this score, black power components advocated key social and political causes. I suggest that scholars apply a deeper historical perspective to black power. The movement's roots in the post-World War I era's new Negro nationalism and the Great Depression and Second World War freedom surges necessitate a longer historical view to take stock of black power's development, evolution, and interaction with civil rights, the Cold War, and the rise of the post-war American state itself. Black power may have been harnessed in black communities, but its many-fold iterations challenge the scope and breadth of liberalism, democracy, the nation-state, and how we envision the practice of democracy at the local, regional, national, and global arena. Black power's impact on American democracy has been under-theorized. In documenting a richer, more nuanced, and expansive history of the era, Black Power Studies reveals the movement's critique of and interaction with democratic institutions. The scholarship does this by expanding the historical focus of the black freedom struggle from a top-down recitation of the speeches and controversies that enveloped well-known activists to a ground-level view of the ways in which ordinary black people utilized the movement's ethos to make their lives better. While paying attention to leadership and the cultural legacies that have so dominated discussions of black power, this growing body of scholarship focuses on the movement's political manifestations and thus contrasts with William Vandenberg's groundbreaking cultural history, New Day in Babylon, published in 1992, which argued that the era's most profound legacy remained rooted in its cultural flourishes. Culture undoubtedly remains a key aspect of black power, but too often it has been the primary lens through which we view the era at the expense of documenting the movement's pragmatic political side, relationship with civil rights activists and organizations, and impact at the community-wide level. The new scholarship devoted to the Black Power era rewrites post-war American history in 6 significant ways. First, it revises the era's chronology, pushing back the movement's origins to the early post-war era. Consequently, this scholarship reveals the way in which black power efforts paralleled and in certain cases overlapped with modern civil rights activism. Second, it expands the movement's geographical breadth and organizational diversity. Black power thrived in the South and urban Midwest, as well as northern and West Coast inner cities. Moreover, the movement's ethos penetrated community organizations devoted to anti-poverty and labor activism, black studies and the black arts, and progressive domestic and foreign policy agendas. Third, the new scholarship unearths the movement's pragmatic history, where activists fought for bread and butter issues that range from tenants and welfare rights to full employment, public schools, and health care. Fourth, it places black power activism at the center of struggles for radical democracy in the post-war era. From this perspective, black power, no less than civil rights, proved instrumental in transforming post-war American democratic institutions. Black power activists' penchant for doing so in a language and an idiom that ridiculed civil rights struggles has obscured the manner in which militants pursued similar goals of racial justice and economic equality through different means. Fifth, this new scholarship suggests that black power activism traversed international boundaries, indelibly impacting the middle stages of the Cold War through anti-Vietnam War activism and local and national pro-Africa demonstrations, a tactic aided by strategic alliances between urban militants and black elected officials.